So thank you, and thank you for joining me today. We have a very exciting program to talk about pooled trusts. I know I talk regularly with clients about these, and for those who do not know, my name's Amy O'Hara, and I'm a partner here at Littman Krooks, where we practice in the areas of elder law, special needs planning, trust and estates, estate administration. And I'm welcomed today by a special guest, Lee Ackerman, who is the Executive Director of Act for Life Services. And so thank you, Lee, for joining me. And Life Services is a fantastic pooled trust organization and so much more than just pooled trusts. They provide advocacy and oversight for individuals with disabilities. They help families plan for when the families will no longer be there, and serve as that kind of that family connection when there are no other individuals. And they also provide, which is today's topic, supplemental needs trust services through first and third party pooled trusts. Just for those who just joined, again, please feel free to ask questions in the chat box. And Lee and I have not rehearsed this, so it's going to be kind of ad lib. Lee has, and I think I mentioned, he's been executive director at Life Services for 14 years now. And so we're just going to go back and forth a little bit today, talking about pooled trusts. Some of it, I know that there's people that are joining this call that are probably know as much about pooled trusts than I do and Lee does. So hopefully you won't be, too bored here, but because I am going to go over some of the basics. And just to take a step back about a pooled trust. So when we're dealing with special needs planning, and oftentimes we want to protect the inheritance for an individual with disabilities because, one, they may not be able to have the capacity to manage that inheritance, and two, they may need to receive government benefits or government entitlements such as SSI and Medicaid. And the idea is that these supplemental needs trusts, if they're structured properly, are exempt and they're not counted as the beneficiary's assets. And when I'm counseling clients with the use of these supplemental needs trusts, which in New York, we could use the term special needs trust or SNT, they're used interchangeably. We look at what type of trust structure is most appropriate for the family and for the beneficiary ultimately. One way is through what's called testamentary trusts, which is a trust established under an individual, oftentimes a parent's last will and testament. But that trust does not go into effect until that individual dies, until the parent dies. And so there's significant downsides with the use of a testamentary trust in that we can't fund it during your lifetime. You can't make changes to it. It's oftentimes court supervised, and if we want to go and change a trustee, we have to get the court's permission, which takes a few months. Then we're dealing, another option is inter vivos trusts or standalone trusts. And those are trusts that could go into effect now, the day that they're signed. They could be funded now. And you get control over making changes or funding it now, and depending on how the trust is structured, sometimes we could change the remainder beneficiaries, and we just have more flexibility. And in choosing a trustee, there's sometimes individual trustees, there's corporate trustees, and then there's nonprofit trustees through nonprofit organizations. And that's kind of where this subset of pooled special needs trusts come about. Through the use of a trust that's established by a nonprofit organization, and the assets are pooled together for investment purposes, and each beneficiary has their own trust account so that their own personal assets are not commingled except for investment purposes. And I'll let Lee explain that a little bit. And we'll get into the benefits and advantages and some disadvantages of the use of pooled trusts. But I want to turn it over to Lee for a minute now. But before I do, when we're looking at these pooled trusts, one aspect is the source of the funds. And so is the source of the funds coming from the beneficiary themselves, whether it's through an inheritance outright with not proper estate planning, through a settlement, whether there was a malpractice settlement or some type of litigation settlement or some other windfall, and that they have assets themselves that we want to protect. And as such, they need to put their assets into a pooled trust, a first party. That's what we refer to as a first party pooled trust. Then there's the third party pooled trust, when mom and dad or other family members want to make gifts or leave their estate in trust, as that's what I was really touching upon before. And those assets are what we refer to as third party pooled trusts. And that as well is what, like for example, Life Services they have a third party pooled trust as well as a first party pooled trust, and can serve as the trustee of these trusts. So Lee, I'll let you take over for a minute, and welcome and thank you.
So I want to start out and make sure everybody heard the part, because everybody, when people hear pooled trust, they think I can spend your child's money on somebody else's in the pool. And the answer is no. Any assets in a pooled trust are only for the person who the funds are identified and can never be spent on another person. And so as a nonprofit, we are permitted to offer this service to the community. For-profit corporations aren't able to do so. And when I'm talking, I'm going to be giving examples from the Life Services Trust. Many trusts, many of the nonprofits have similar services. There are always a list of things to look for and consider when picking the pooled trust that is best for you. But many of the things that all nonprofits do is we create, as Amy said, the master trust document. And then Amy or your other attorney or whomever links your estate to the pooled trust via a sponsor or joinder agreement. And that agreement details everything about you and your family, and also importantly, what happens to the funds when the disabled individual passes on. And so with that information, we open a sub-account in the Life Services Pooled Trust. Now, some of the many advantages of doing this is that it's a much lower cost to go into an existing pooled trust. You don't have to pay Amy or another attorney to write your own trust and a standalone. And then the nonprofit is the trustees. So if you don't have other people who are age appropriate, skill appropriate, care to do it, available, who live in the right area to serve as trustees, the pooled trust, the nonprofit, is the trustee. Amy?
Yeah, I'd like to pause there for a minute, because I'd say that's one of the most important advantages of using a pooled trust is the trustee. For reasons that, one, there may not be individual family member or friends available, or it may not be appropriate because of let's say there is a sibling, but it's not an appropriate sibling relationship to put one sibling in charge of the other sibling's money, inheritance. Also that sometimes families don't have the means to have the level of a corporate trustee, where oftentimes they have at least $1 million minimum to use their services as a corporate trustee, a minimum, and there's not that many out there. Oftentimes now their minimums are $2 to $3 million, and it rules out many people in planning, and that's a great advantage of a pooled trust.
And with that, when Amy earlier was referring to settlements and lump sum self-settled first-party money, writing your own first-party trust and getting it approved by Social Security and Medicaid is not a quick process. So the use of what happens in many situations that Life Services is called in on is that nobody realized the individual who is getting the funds is on SSI and Medicaid, and all of a sudden the estate is being settled and $100,000 is going to them. They want a lawsuit against a shady landlord for discrimination, and they can't accept the money, the settlement, because it kicks them off of SSI and Medicaid because they would be over their resource limits. And so with a pooled first party trust, we are there and able to really quickly open up an account and accept those funds so that the person is able to accept the settlement, benefit from it, and not lose their government entitlement benefits. So there are a variety of different ways that our pooled trusts offer a lot of unique solutions to individuals in need at different times and at different positions in their life. One of the other advantages beyond the trustee is that the size of the pooled trust and the nonprofit means that we are able to negotiate for better expenses and overhead costs for the individual and our trust. So when I look at an estate or a trust with less than $1 million, a nonprofit pooled trust, the life services pooled trust, we probably save the trust beneficiary between 0.7 and 0.9% a year in cost than doing it alone. And that's through two separate ways. One, as trustee with a large trust, we're able to negotiate a much lower investment fee. And in this case, it's our co-trustee investment fee. And at this point in time for life services, that is at 0.9% annually. Most money managers charge 1.25% to 1.5% now. The other thing that we're able to do is, greatly reduce the cost of doing the trust tax returns. Regardless of, all right, I get a call every April 14th, probably 2 to 3 from siblings. Mom and dad died 3 years ago, and I've been trustee on a special needs trust for my brother. And I've never filed tax returns. Do I have to file tax returns? And the answer is unfortunately yes. And you have some difficulties here. And with a pooled trust, we're able to bring down the cost of the tax return to each beneficiary to $190 a year. In a standalone trust, you have to go out and secure an accountant. And talking to one of the accountants we use for our trust beneficiary tax returns that we assist them with, the accountant says on a $250,000 third-party trust, if there was good record keeping and he can get his hands on the tax forms, he charges about $1,250 to $1,500 a year to do that tax return. Okay, and so $1,250 versus $190 is a significant savings. Our goal as a nonprofit with the pooled trust is to maintain the assets for the disabled individual. And so we do everything we can to maintain a lower overhead and cost effectiveness so that there are more assets available for the rest of that individual's life. Amy, do you have anything to add in at that point?
No, I would just add into how the investment policies with pooled trusts are structured in terms of the board of directors and the co-trustee, how there's oversight on the ongoing investment policies.
Yes, so there I just saw that on the chat.
Oh, was that? I actually did.
Yeah, sorry. So life services,
Yeah, you're right on. Yeah.
And whatever pooled trust, if you ask, pooled trust, ABC company, there are certain documents and things that each pooled trust should be able to provide you. And one of them is the investment policy for the pooled trust. The life services investment policy is available. It's on our website. And essentially it is 55% in equities, 1 to 2% in cash. So we have money on hand because we're always paying bills for people. And then the rest in fixed income. Now at Life Services, we have hired Key Bank as our corporate co-trustee and custodian of the funds. And so it is their responsibility to implement the Life Services investment policy, which we have developed with them, okay, and approved. And we review it at every board meeting. We have an investment committee prior to the meeting. There is ongoing review of our investments. We hold ad hoc meetings as needed. And in 2020, we held more ad hoc investment meetings than I care to discuss ever again or do, as the market went left, right, up, down, back and forth, and we were positioning ourselves to be available and to have the assets protected for our trust beneficiaries. Okay. And so that's part of the process of the nonprofit. And so we have hired, and Life Services is not picking stocks, and hopefully the other nonprofits are not picking stocks, that they have hired a money manager, set the policy, have indicated what the goals are and the anticipated returns, and then they monitor that policy and those returns with the investment group. And are there questions on that one? I saw the one that was typed in. So we're using Key Bank. Until recently, we had been using TD Bank as our co-trustee. My website has not been updated to reflect that change. We are in the process of transitioning to Key Bank right now. And Key Bank brings to our trust beneficiaries some additional services that were not available with TD Bank, unfortunately. Over the past 10 years with TD Bank, I have to go actually 9 years because I don't have the 2020 calculation. Our average annual return in what is known as the balanced portfolio has been over 7.5%. It's slightly higher than that, and with 2020 ending how it did, it will be above that. And
So,
you touch that, the Nancy question?
yes, so yes, they do. I'm going to come back to that though, because I wanted to move on to one other aspect, although there may be one more on if have policies. There's a question from Barbara about percentages. So Nancy, we haven't forgotten about your question. Percentage in equities and fixed income, can you vary those policies if the market factors so dictate, or are you stuck with them?
Good question, Barbara. Thank you. Our policy has a range. So if the goal is actually with the updated policy, I think the range in equities is 40 to 60%. I'd have to open up the policy, which would take me a minute, in equities, and then correspondingly 60 to 40% in fixed income. So with the money manager, the investment manager, we are looking at, should we be reducing our exposure to equities, to stocks? Should we be increasing fixed income? Of course, in this day and age, there's no return on fixed income. And so it really is giving us, a headache, as with everybody who is investing. And so we look at that and where we are going, what the investment group is advising, and where we should be in the next several years. And so that's how we target that.
So Lee, I want to change direction just a little bit and actually factor in Nancy's question, because this couples with another question that we got via email. One, must the individual with a disability reside in New York, or the beneficiary of the trust? And also, can these pool trusts be used for regular trust? And that was a question that came in. So first, to answer the first question, Nancy's question, the disabled individual does not need to reside in New York, but it depends on the pool trust. So some pool trusts are very state specific, whereas others are more national, and they have the ability to have beneficiaries in various states. Life Services does have beneficiaries outside of New York State, New
York, New Jersey, Florida, Montana, Minnesota, Connecticut.
Ohio? No.
Nobody in Ohio right now. Somebody decamped, though I expect her to return, unfortunately for her. But Somebody just moved to Massachusetts, but I don't think it's going well. Because our trust is the way we are structured is if the individual setting up the trust, the parent, is a resident of New York, and if their disabled relative lived in Colorado, we would be able to serve as their trustee because the siting of the trust was in New York. Did that get that question? I saw a Colorado question. I see a question on what is our annual fee. Life Services has a 1% trustee fee on the first $1 million in trust. For trust accounts in excess of $1 million, we have a reduced sliding fee schedule. That is on our website, which I will type in onto the.
I'm going to cut and paste it into it.
Okay.
Right there now. With all the attachment, I'm sending the link with all the
All
attachments.
right. And that, so we have a sliding fee schedule. The more funds in trust, the lower the fee schedule is. Okay. We take and process the fee schedule in 1/12 increments. So at the end of every month, based on the value of the last day of the month, we take a little bit of the 1% throughout the year. For trust accounts under $100,000, we do have an annual flat fee of $750. For people in the first party trust, which is something Amy and I have not really talked about yet. So that's the money ended up in the individual's name. There was a settlement, there was a lawsuit, there was a botched estate. We have set up that trust to primarily be a trust that instead of paying back Medicaid when the disabled individual dies, the funds stay in the trust to benefit others in the trust. So right now, and we have to do this by state of residence and state of the trust. So right now in New York, I have retained funds in our New York first party pooled trust account. And so in lieu of charging the annual flat fee to people who have less than 100,000, we're using the retained fees, the retained assets to offset the fees for people. That way we maximize the assets that are available for those individuals. We also have some ability to do some other things with those funds, but we do use them to offset the fees where appropriate and where we are legally able to do so.
So, thank you, Lee. I want to, move on to one aspect that I find that pooled trusts can offer, and in particular, Life Services, because of what your nonprofit mission surrounds, but where individual trustees and corporate trustees lack, and that's advocacy. I find in my experience, and really, and not just because they're on, he's joining me as a Zoom, but in Life Services has this branch of advocacy that's really bar none for, unless if it's a trustee family member that's in the business, which most aren't, and you won't really find with your corporate trustees, is not only being able to leave your assets into a pooled trust and have them exempt and have your loved one qualify and maintain eligibility for government benefits, but who's going to look out for them when you're no longer there? And who's going to make sure that, they are, and if sometimes there's not guardians appointed, there is no guardian, and there's no need to have a guardian because the individual, doesn't need that level of care, but needs some oversight. Who's going to make sure that there's milk in the fridge, or that there's some interaction with going to the movies or different things. And so Life Services offers this advocacy aspect, which, Lee, I'm going to turn that over to you, because I think that's such a tremendous benefit.
Well, I have to laugh about Amy's milk in the fridge. I'll do a quick little thing on that, and then I'll talk more about the advocacy program in detail. We had an individual who was living in a group home out in Suffolk County, kind of a fraternity house group home. Would it be my favorite well-run program? It would not have been. And our guy was really high functioning, and the parents had hired us to provide an advocacy program. And one of the things my advocates would do every week when they visited the group home was open the refrigerator and see how much milk was in it. Our guy was on a limited diet, and he should have had skim milk and breakfast cereal. And in that group home could not keep skim milk or milk in stock. And so Monday morning, he would walk, and I know this because the Wendy's was nearby. What is it? The Wendy's French toast dipping sticks with the Caro syrup crap for syrup. Well, he would be over at Wendy's for breakfast because there was no milk in the group home. And so it sounds really stupid, but here I got a guy on a restrictive diet. The group home can't keep milk in. And I don't care what the problem is, what their reason for not, I don't care if everybody else in the group home drank it all weekend. The bigger issue was that our individual, his diet was not being met. It was the group home's responsibility to meet it. And there we were every Sunday night checking the milk out. So Life Services has an optional advocacy program that is checking the milk, if that was what was specific to that individual, or is providing for quality of life, taking people out to activities and things in the community back when we could all do that, and we'll be doing again later this year, hopefully. And also it is that fill in the gap service. So we have people who do not receive much or few or any supports, who live very independently, but need assistance with their Social Security. We have an individual who is legally blind. Our advocate is there weekly and processes his his snail mail, checks on the status of his apartment. We have helped him hire a home health aide. He's a wonderful, sweet, nice man. He's a little resistant to change, and he's legally blind. He can't see that his favorite sweater is covered in stains. And so, one of the things the advocate is doing is helping convince him that it's time to go shopping. We have a lot of individuals who have money management issues, who might be receiving their own Social Security, might be needing a Social Security representative payee, might have budget problems. Through using the TrueLink Visa program, we are able to help with their budget problems, where money is only put on a credit card, really a debit card, at certain points in time throughout the week, so that the individual doesn't overspend. We have the ability to do that with Social Security. We have the ability to do that now with a different type of credit card through KeyBank. So our goal in our advocate program is a quality of life. We're not tied to a residential program or a nursing home or assisted living or where the individual is today in the community. We go where the individual goes throughout their lifespan. So when people do a planning program with Life Services, we create a letter of intent with the family for whoever their trust is. They're not required to use our trust, which indicates these are the things we want for my relative or for myself. And in there is, if I'm in hospice, have somebody with me all the time. If I'm in a nursing home or rehab, increase the hours to make sure I'm getting the attention that I need. Last year, 2020 was an awful year. And 2019 for several of our members was a difficult year. And they transitioned. They were older. They went to an assisted living program. They had a health crisis. They ended up in a nursing home. They were at the end of the corridor, not getting much in the way of supports or services. And because we had a funded trust with the advocacy program, we were there on a very regular basis, 5 times a week, whatever it was that it needed to help make sure that the individual is getting the supports that they need. So it's from banking, fiscal, health, nursing home, assisted living. We go and do what the individual needs, and it varies throughout their lifespan. We also, in some situations, because there is no guardian, there's no relatives, And if we are comfortable in what the individual wants and the individual is comfortable with us, we have the ability to serve as a healthcare proxy. We have an ability to serve as a durable power of attorney, which is limited, and Amy and I closely discuss that whenever that comes up. And we also have buried many of our individuals, which sounds awful, but when it has reached that point in time and there's no other family members, we are the responsible party in many situations to secure their final transition. And I'm going to take a break for a moment, and
Okay.
I saw things coming in.
Yeah, there's some good questions coming in. Let me just see if I wanted to cover anything before we look at these questions. Actually, let's go into the questions. I'm going to go in order here. That way we don't miss any.
Okay.
Can you create an inter vivos third-party trust in addition to a testamentary if one already exists? So yes, you can. You just want to make sure it's coordinated. And where are your assets being distributed at your passing? So through beneficiary designation or will, your last will and testament, or as a transfer on death type designation. So it's just important to coordinate all of that.
Please.
Because ultimately, if it's not coordinated, you could end up with multiple trusts that may not be necessary, but also sometimes if it's not coordinated, there could be a missed asset and it could go outright to the individual. And then we're left with no choice but to use a first party trust. And maybe this is a good time to touch upon this, is remainder beneficiaries. So with a first party self-settled special needs trust, if it's a standalone, Medicaid is going to be the primary beneficiary, for lack of a better word. But if there's any assets remaining in the trust at the end of the beneficiary's lifetime, the assets will be used to pay back any Medicaid that was used on their behalf during their lifetime. And alternatively, and Lee touched upon this a bit, is if you use a pool trust, you do have that option to bypass, if you wanted to go to the heirs, because after the Medicaid is paid off, then it could go to the beneficiary's estate or heirs. But with pool trusts, oftentimes because the Medicaid lien will override what assets are in the first party pool trust, that the assets will remain to benefit other beneficiaries within the trust. On the third party trust, and this is where sometimes it's a disadvantage using a pool trust as opposed to a standalone trust, is that the pool trust, nonprofit, and life services, or any other ones, most other ones out there, they're going to hold on to a piece of the remainder to benefit their nonprofit mission, not to benefit themselves, not to go in their pocket or to increase their salary, but to benefit the other individuals, beneficiaries, or to further their mission, their nonprofit mission. And it's usually a percentage of what's left. But, working with life services and other pool trusts over the years, I have never once seen a pool trust ever say that, oh, I don't want to spend money on this beneficiary because it's going to impact what the trustee, can get at the end of the day. Not once have I ever seen that. I have seen, and Lee has spent the very last dollar on an individual's, to see like their funeral and other, end of life issues, and life services doesn't get anything, or another pool trust won't get anything. So yes, if there happens to be funds remaining, the pool trust will take a percentage of those.
I want to go back to those assets Amy was talking about. As a nonprofit, in addition to what our pool trusts are, in certain conditions and situations, as executive director, Life Services has the ability to serve as the trustee in a standalone trust. It increases the expenses. It's more complicated. It makes reporting and other functions harder for any government entities. And Amy and I are dealing with a situation right now, unbeknownst to me, when I became the successor trustee 2 years ago. Only this past summer did I figure out that there were retirement assets in the name of that trust. And it's a first party trust. I've been trying to prove since August that I am the successor to the successor trustees to the retirement agency, and that they have to talk to me. And these funds are sitting out there. We're now aware of it. We found out, thankfully, by accident, but we did find out. And it's a first party trust. And because Medicaid is requiring me to do an audit, my accounting for this will say, I know I'm trustee on this, but I can't get my hands on it yet. I'm still working on it with the retirement company because they don't, I'm having to prove who I am. And so what happens is, because people didn't follow all the dots and connect all the estate materials, we have this thing standing out there that is very difficult and problematic to resolve, and creates a Medicaid problem because they have lots of questions about it that I'm unable to answer at this point in time.
Thank you. Moving on to other questions, what's the process and consequences from withdrawing from the trust? And I don't know if that question is for withdrawing assets, like how do you make distributions, or to withdraw if you want to terminate the trust. So I don't know, Savitri, if you want to just clarify that, or Lee, you can answer both questions each way.
So currently,
terminate. The answer is terminate. Like how does somebody want to terminate the trust?
That's a really tough question.
Hard.
So there are funds in the trust. Okay. Termination is really difficult. Because under what situation and circumstances do we terminate the trust? And we at Life Services have been concerned because we have had good returns. And so let's say I have a trust with an asset value of $100,000, and for whatever reason, the trust beneficiary wants me to terminate the trust. They are no longer, let's say first, they're no longer on government entitlement benefits. I terminate the trust, I give them the money, okay? They then are re-injured, whatever happens, they need government entitlement benefits again. That money is now sitting out there preventing them from getting it. Also, because we've had good returns, they've had to pay a capital gains tax on that estate, on that trust transfer out. And maybe it was a $20,000 tax bill, okay? I have not potentially exercised my fiduciary responsibility in that I have caused a tax bill to be incurred. I've permitted it to occur, and the person may be on or off of government entitlement benefits, and now I've created a new expense and benefit blocker.
Well, and then as the lawyer, and then if Lee came to me and said, here's the situation, I would almost advise him to get a court order to effectuate that termination to protect the fiduciary, to protect Life Services, because from time to time, Life Services will deal with, for example, beneficiaries that have mental illness. And there may be times when the individual's stable and can be working and may not need to rely on government benefits, and then something happens and they're no longer stable. So there may be a period of, under that scenario, if Life Services made the distribution of the assets out, and then without getting a court approval, so that way everybody gets noticed and properly it's vetted through the judicial system, again, to protect the beneficiary and to protect Life Services or whoever the trustee is. Because what you don't want is for the beneficiary, and this happens in private family situations when there's a family member serving as trustee, and they come to me, and because they, all of a sudden are being sued by their sibling or by their, whoever they were, the family member or friend was serving as trustee of, because now that beneficiary went and spent all the money and has no money any longer, and now sues the trustee saying, why did you ever give me this money? And they could be successful, actually. It's scary. They could be successful in that, like in that suit. So that would be my lawyer response to protect the trustee.
In addition, I do want to say though, so the Life Services First Party Trust, different states have different regulatory requirements. So if somebody moved from New York to Massachusetts, in Massachusetts, the first party trust is not permitted in that manner, or in other states, they have other regulatory requirements. We would consider working with that other state and pooled trust providers in that state to accept a transfer of funds. Because if there are specific things to Michigan or Ohio's first party trust requirements, we would want, our trust has not been approved in all 50 states, the first party trust, for example. And this would be a process that through a transfer to another pooled trust, we might be able to meet that need and that requirement.
Lee, I'm gonna, we need to, because I'm looking at the clock and we have about 15 minutes left because I want to be mindful of everybody's schedule. So I'm going to just go through these questions a little bit more quickly since there's a lot more coming in. But does Life Services help find somebody, a group home who's high functioning but socially isolated?
Well, that's the toughest question of all these days. High functioning individuals really don't go into group homes.
And I would say though, but they need to be in the system in order to go in the group home. So they have to be registered through OPWDD if it's developmental or intellectual disabilities, or OMH, Office of Mental Health, if we're dealing with mental health. So that's kind of your gateway to get into the residential placements. How much is your advocacy program?
So our advocacy program, which is on the fee schedule on the link that Amy sent out here, it is the cost of the advocate plus a 25% administrative overhead. We charge for travel time because many of the appointments are for 1 hour, 2 hours. And so to be able to get an advocate there, we do charge for the travel time. Each advocate has a different rate of pay, and our rates of pay vary by state. Here in the New York region, our average advocacy rate of pay is $50 an hour, which would bring it up to $62.50 for the hourly charge of the advocate. Okay, there is some variation in that. Then all the expenses for the service, parking, mileage, oftentimes when we take somebody to the doctor, it includes the meal. Maybe that's the point in time that the advocate takes them clothes shopping if the individual needed assistance with that. Our advocates have corporate credit cards, and so we are able to purchase things on behalf of the individual with the individual. Everybody likes to try on their own clothes. And we used to love Macy's Herald Square, because if you can't find it there, you're not going to find it anywhere. And we would have people shopping there with an advocate because we want to contain cost. Going from store to store to store is more expensive than picking one location, one spot to do it.
So Lee, and actually this question is more for me in terms of whether pooled trust can ever be used for reasons other than special needs, such as for Medicaid planning. So yes and no, but if we're looking to protect assets in terms of 5-year planning, or now in the community Medicaid setting, since New York's having some significant changes for home care, pooled trusts don't serve that role for, you'd have to go to a lawyer that focuses on elder law to make sure it's a proper trust, and have your own trust agreement put in place to move some of your assets to for purposes of protection in the event that you ever need Medicaid to pay for your long-term care. However, there are what's referred to as pooled income trusts available for individuals who are at home and need to qualify for Medicaid at home, not in a nursing home setting, but for what's referred to as home care or community-based Medicaid. And under New York's current Medicaid rules, and this has always been fluid and changing, but if an individual has more than $850 a month of income, we're able to shelter any excess income or surplus income into what's called a pooled income trust. And that pooled income trust then uses the money each month to pay for the beneficiary's bills, whether it's, heating, the oil, the cable, whatever you want to just use that money each month. You don't want the money to sit there. So Life Services isn't in the market to offer those type of trusts. They do offer it for existing individuals that may be a beneficiary of another trust or that they provide advocacy for, but more purely for that elder law setting, there are pooled trusts in New York, such as NYSARC, that offer that pooled income trust service. And that word that I said.
Well, Amy, you went on mute.
How did that happen? I didn't touch anything. When did I go on mute? Just now?
Just now, yeah.
Okay. So
You
I
can
said
set that
NYSARC,
aside.
NYSARC. They offer pooled income trust for that elderly setting. Okay.
Okay. I want to go up to one of the things Amy said on estate planning. So in the past, we had a mother and disabled son living at home, and in their estate planning, they created an irrevocable trust to own the property, as it was anticipated that the adult son would continue to live in that property after mom died. And it was part of that estate, that family's Medicaid planning, listing Life Services as the trustee on the irrevocable trust for the property. So in certain situations, we will do that, full vetting, making sure that it's a reasonable plan, that we know the individuals, that the attorneys have all blessed this, and we think it will work, okay? Because it's very, it's a long-term plan, and we want to make sure the assets and funds are there to support the individual in a private residence, because we never want to be in the position of having to kick somebody out of a home because there aren't enough funds to support the home. I also saw a question about the pension. I'm very pleased to announce that Life Services now has the ability to create a separate trust account within the pooled trust to hold tax-deferred assets. So many of us, our retirement assets are in 403B, SEP IRAs, 401ks, whatever the name of those items are. And we now have the ability to hold those assets in a separate trust account within the trust and administer them for the individual. So, you're 75, you have $500,000 in tax sheltered assets. We can now set up a separate account to hold those assets for the disabled individual. That would be expensed out, paid out over their life expectancy per the RMD requirements of the IRS. As for a pension question, Amy, do you want to touch that one?
I don't know what that question related to in terms of a pension. If only then if it was surplus income for purposes of income to be distributed, like excess income.
So typically where we have somebody who does have a pension, or we've had a couple of individuals whose parents, their pension was able to go to their disabled child upon their death. New York City, depending on what contract period you were, if you had a disabled adult child, you might be able to reduce your New York City pension and have it pay out to your child upon your death. Typically that goes to the child's name first, their checking account, and then because of the $850 income limit that Amy was talking about, we then transferred into the Life Services first party pooled trust to fund their supports that way.
Can advocacy be charged, covered by the New York State's self-direction program through OPWDD?
We haven't figured out how to do that yet. We have provided some supports and are expanding in there. The signature issue is the issue, and who's approving it and how that's done. So we have been asked to oversee self-direction in lieu of a parent. And we haven't figured out how to do that yet. And that's always a moving target, and who has the legal authority to sign off on the paperwork. We are paying some bills up front now for people who are in self-direction. And then we're submitting with the family at this point in time, the reimbursement bill for that. So we pay the cable bill, we submit that information to the self-direction broker, whoever the payer is, and then that is transferred back to the trust. So the money just kind of goes around and around. Having said that, with the current changes in self-direction and the government funding crisis, God only knows where we will be at year end with those sort of expenditures.
So Lee, that kind of leads me to the last thing that I want to broach today, and maybe there's something else, but how do you handle requests for distribution? Whether it's ongoing routine expenses, or it's a cell phone or Amazon, or and what if it's a large, like I want to buy a car, or I want to spend $5,000 on a vacation? Like, I don't know if you have if you could answer all that in 5 minutes, but.
Okay. Real quick. So one, I'm not a big believer in forms. I believe at Life Services, if you email, fax me, or snail mail me your utility bill, you want me to pay for it. Okay. So we have a dedicated email address, billpay@Act for Life Services. Many people send their bills there. They receive them at home. They scan them. Our advocates have helped our members set up scanning faxing machines, as I'm pointing to the big one here next to my desk, top here. So the individual can scan, email, and send us the bills directly. We have a PO box that we have people set up their Con Edison bill. So it is the, Lee Ackerman, care of Act for Life Services, and our PO box, or John Smith, the name of it. So we receive their bills directly so that we can pay them. Fax, email. So that's the easy ways to get the bills to us. The other thing that we do is that we have people create wish lists. So if somebody is on SSI and you can't buy food for them, just because you get toilet paper at the grocery store does not make it food. Okay, laundry detergent, shampoo. We have many people who have the ability to make Amazon wish list. And so if they're on SSI, for example, and that's limited, that's $780 a month or whatever it is now. And we know that's very limiting, and yet the trust paid for food, that reduces their $780. And so by paying and creating a wish list on Amazon, they email us at bill pay and say, Lee, wish list is ready. We go online, we review and order it as appropriate. We get some crazy requests that exceed the budget or negatively impact their benefits. Going to the car question, there has to be a driver's license. They have to be insurable. They have to be the assets available to pay for the car and maintain it.
And not use the majority of the assets.
And not use the majority of the assets. We go through a whole laundry list of questions to prevent the car from being sold and getting people kicked off of government entitlement benefits. The trust puts a lien on the car. And so that when it's time to sell the sell the car, the lien is still held by the trust. Even if the car is paid in full, I hold a lien on it. The money comes back to the Life Services Trust. And if we're buying a new car for the person, we buy the new car for the person. Takes a lot of paperwork, but it prevents the individual from losing their benefits or selling their car for other items.
And you would never want the car titled in the name of the trust, whether it's a pool trust or a standalone trust, because if that driver ever got into an accident, it would subject the trust assets to liability. So it's best practice to have the driver, the beneficiary's name on the title.
We have many people who receive minimal to no government services. They don't live in a group home. They're community-based. They're on SSI, SNAP, and Medicaid, okay? And you know, have difficult lives. And so getting that cell phone bill from them in a timely enough manner to keep their cell phone on has been a real challenge. And today the cell phone is their link to media, to internet, to their doctors, to everything. And so one of the things we do at Life Services is we have an AT&T corporate cell phone account, where right now I have something like 14 individuals who have cell phones through that. And so we maintain the account, we buy phones, we ship them to them, and I get one bill. Life Services Incorporated pays that bill and then charges back to their trust account every month their portion of that bill. And that keeps everybody's cell phone turned on. We do everything we can. As we talked earlier, if there's an advocacy program involved, the advocate goes shopping with people, the advocate helps set up things. We have helped people get the Uber app on their cell phone. We have people who don't have ready access to New York City transportation. They live in Nassau, they live in Suffolk, they live in Missoula, Montana. And by working with them to be able to use Uber or other products like that, they're able to get to and from doctor appointments far more conveniently and easy. What else do we have here?
I think we asked all the questions. I think we're going to wrap up in a minute. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. I'll leave it just up, the chat box up. I'll see if there's any last minute quick question. Otherwise, I can't thank Lee Ackerman, again, Executive Director of Act for Life Services, joining me today. So any information, please check out his website, which was linked before. It's actforlifeservices.org. My office, we just started these lunch and learns again. They were very successful in the summer and this fall. And so please go to our website if you're interested in these lunch and learns, littmankrooks.com, and you'll see, if you're not on our mailing list, you're welcome to join our mailing list, or you could just see that we have ones coming up on estate planning, Medicaid planning, the new Medicaid rules, estate administration, topics. So please check that out. And thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Can we get a copy of this conversation? I think and I'm going to ask my marketing how it works so it is recorded. And I think it goes up maybe on our YouTube channel. Littman Krooks actually does have a YouTube channel. I think that's where, or on our website. So Kian, if you could correct that, if that's not correct.
And I just added a little plug in there. We can now own property within the pooled trust too. For
real estate.
On that real estate.
Okay. So thank you. So yeah, you could look on YouTube or our website for this conversation. Oh yeah, via YouTube or Zoom. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you guys. Bye-bye.
Best wishes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, everyone.